we all love food, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah.
But as we get older, it kind of becomes more than just like what we enjoy,
Yeah.
There's a whole other layer to it, especially when choices are being made for us and, for our loved ones.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And that's where I think this idea of ethical leadership, especially when it comes to senior nutrition, that's where it really gets interesting.
Yeah.
So today we're gonna dive deep into some excerpts that we pulled from pasted text.
Yeah.
And we're gonna see what ethical leadership really looks like when it comes to, feeding seniors, taking care of people.
It's such a crucial topic.
It is. And it's one of those things that kind of gets, swept under the rug or not talked about as much as it should.
Absolutely.
So I'm really excited to kind of unpack this with you.
Yeah, me too.
So let's start with, the very basics.
Sure.
Like, what does ethical leadership actually mean when it comes to, senior nutrition?
Yeah.
And I mean, our source kind of defines it as, really putting the well-being of older adults first, making sure that their needs and preferences are respected.
Absolutely.
Which, seems pretty basic. But I think when you start to peel back the layers of that, it gets a lot more complicated.
Yeah, I think one thing that is really important to understand is that seniors, a lot of times, they're a very vulnerable population.
Right.
They might be relying on other people to make decisions about their meals or even prepare their meals or even just get them to the table.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they might have very specific dietary needs. And as we age, things change about our bodies.
Yeah.
So I think building trust is absolutely paramount. If that trust is broken or if corners are cut, I mean, the consequences can be, really severe.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about, their physical health, it's their mental well-being too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge responsibility.
Absolutely.
I mean, when you think about, you're responsible for someone's, nutrition, their food, which is so essential to life.
Right.
It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And thankfully our source material kind of outlines some key aspects of ethical leadership.
Okay.
When it comes to this.
Yeah.
And one that really kind of jumped out at me was this idea of patient-centered care. Which, I mean, I imagine it goes way beyond just like, here's your food.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a really good example of this would be, imagine a senior who has diabetes.
Right.
But they also have, very specific cultural preferences regarding food.
Okay.
An ethical leader wouldn't just hand them a generic diabetic meal plan.
Right.
And say, here you go.
Right.
They would really work with that person and take into account, what are their individual needs? What's their cultural background? What are the things that they like to eat? What are their preferences?
Yeah.
And try to create a plan that is both healthy and personally meaningful.
Yeah.
So it's about empowering them to make informed choices.
Right. And not just like dictating, here's what you get and you deal with it.
Exactly.
Which I think in any healthcare setting, that's so important.
Absolutely.
But I think especially when it comes to seniors who, might not have as much of a voice as others.
Right.
It's really, really important. Another thing that the source mentions, and I think this is something that's really come to light, especially in recent years, is this idea of evidence-based practices.
Yes.
So could you talk a little bit about what that means in the context of senior nutrition?
Yeah, I think it's, we can't just rely on what we think might be common sense.
Right.
Or what we've always done, because research is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And so, we need to constantly be staying informed about the latest research, the latest guidelines, and really making sure that what we're doing is backed up by science.
Right.
And, a really good example of this would be, there's a lot of research coming out now about the Mediterranean diet.
Yeah.
Which is rich in, fruits, vegetables, healthy fats.
Yeah, the good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
The good stuff.
And, research is really suggesting that this type of diet could be particularly beneficial for seniors.
Interesting.
In terms of their cognitive function, their heart health, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So an ethical leader would be aware of these findings and would be integrating them into their meal planning strategies.
Yeah. So it's really about staying up to date.
Yes.
With the latest, science and information and being adaptable, which I think for anyone working in any kind of, health adjacent field, it's got to be exhausting, right?
It can be.
Because things are constantly changing. But I think it's so important to stay on top of that and to make sure that, you're providing the best possible care. Another key aspect that the source mentions is transparency and communication. And I think that seems particularly important when you're dealing with, not just seniors, but their families.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, imagine you're trying to explain, a very complex dietary restriction to someone who, might be struggling with memory issues.
Right.
Or who just, doesn't quite understand what you're trying to tell them.
Right.
It's so important to use, very clear language.
Yeah.
Maybe use visual aids if that's helpful,
Right.
involve family members.
Right.
Really make sure that everyone understands the situation.
Right.
And that they feel like they're part of the process.
Yeah, it's really about meeting people where they are.
Exactly.
And recognizing that, communication is a two-way street.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we can't overlook this idea of cultural sensitivity.
Yes.
Which I think is so important, especially in a country like, the United States, where we have such a diverse population.
Absolutely.